Hello there. All right, before we get started, let's talk a little bit about some of the basics here. First thing you're going to need is a copy of Unreal Tournament 2004, and go ahead and install that. It's going to come with 6 discs with CDs, or if you're lucky enough to find one of the DVD versions, 1 DVD. Once you've installed that, the editor that we're working with, if you go find in your Start menu the UT 2004 menu, there will be a UT 2004 editor program that you can launch, and that is the editor that we're working with. A couple other things as well. Through the course of the DVD, we will at times be displaying a map name in the lower right portion, like you can see right here on the bottom right. Now, that's going to indicate that you can look at the progress of the map thus far by opening up that map. And aside from that, let's go ahead and get into the editor and start working on building some levels. All right, welcome to the interface overview portion of the Unreal Illuminated DVD. In this section, we're going to be covering the various elements of the interface and how we're going to use them to interact with level and author level. As you can see here, we've got a level loaded up within the editor, and we're going to sit and break down some of the elements that you're going to be using. As you can see, we have standard docs menus up top. We've got several toolbars. A lot of the tools on these toolbars are going to be functions that are accessible up within the menus up top and just sort of shortcuts to them. This bar up here I like to call the editor manipulation toolbar. It has things that are just sort of editor-wide functionality within it. So for example, search for actors, the ability to go in and select static meshes to place within levels, skeletal meshes, that sort of thing, build levels and whatnot. Then over here on the left-hand side, we're going to have the scene manipulation toolbar. This is going to have tools that are more oriented towards working with what we actually have in the scene already. Stuff for moving objects around, rotating objects, creating new geometry within the level, visibility within the level, those sorts of things. And you can see as well that they're expandable and collapsible. Also, if you have it expanded to the point where things extend past the bottom of the screen, you'll get a little bar on the right-hand side of those toolbars to scroll down with. On the bottom here, we've got another set of just sort of miscellaneous tools. We've got a shortcut to the command line, which allows us to enter script commands. You know what those are. We've got the lock selection and toggle large vertices, toggle grid, snap on and off. We've got the grid size selector, rotation snap, full screen, which doesn't work, and then a quick shortcut to Draw Scale 3D for working with static mesh objects. All right, so let's take a look inside a finished level and see how we're going to maneuver around within the 3D space. You can see here we've got the level and all sorts of objects in it, and what we need to be able to do is maneuver within it. So what we're doing is right-clicking to rotate the view around in the viewport. I'm left and right clicking at the same time to pan up and down. I'm holding down the left mouse button and dragging forward to move forward. Again, right clicking and dragging to rotate the view. And just getting used to working within this as a 3D environment, maneuvering within it is very important to what you're going to be doing here. In the orthographic views up above, if I right-click or left-click and drag, I'm going to pan the view around, and if I right and left-click, I'm going to zoom in and out of the scene. Pretty standard functionality for how you're going to work within a 3D editor, but it does take a bit of getting used to if you're coming from a different application or you've never done it before. You also notice in each of these views there's a set of tool buttons that exist on a per view basis. What we've just clicked there is the real-time preview button. Once we click that button, you can see that we're getting sort of an interactive update and real-time preview of what's going to happen within the level. For example, we had some water surfaces there that are showing the sort of perturbing that's going to happen on them. Also, we've got particle effects within the levels. Once the real-time preview is selected, then the particle effects will begin to play in real time so we can see what they're looking like. And also you can see that default here, we've got a lighted preview of the entire level. This isn't necessarily the only way we can look at it. You can see the TF and S there. That's for top, front, and side. To switch that to a orthographic view, you can see also we've got several other types of displays. Displays will show us our BSP cuts. Displays will show us our texture usage. Displays will show it in flat textured. See a lighting only display here in just a moment for the luminance of the level. Next one's going to be our default dynamic lighting view, which is going to show you what the final actual level is going to look like once it's built. And then the zone portal view, which is going to show us how we've segmented our level up into performance portions or zones so that it runs better. Turning real-time preview off, you'll notice also seals off the zones from themselves. We're going to talk more about authoring that later, but we create these pieces of geometry to seal off the zones. You can see with real-time preview off that we can't see through them. We can see, of course, moving around within the environment here that there's quite a bit in the way of objects and functionality that's placed in the level, both 3D objects and things that are just placed there to provide functionality, such as sounds or info nodes or triggers and whatnot. So what we're going to do here is talk about how to select and move those around. Selecting objects is as simple as just moving to where you want to in a view and clicking on an object. Left mouse button, you can see there. Also, once we've clicked on an object, we can move it around. This is accomplished by holding down the control button and moving with the left mouse button, which you can see here in the orthographic views. We can also hold down the shift mouse button and shift in the left mouse button and drag so the camera pans with the object that we're moving. See here in the perspective view, if we grab an object, we can move it as well. It's going to move along one of your 3 cardinal axes. The right mouse button and control is going to move along Y. The left mouse button and control is going to move along X, and both the left and right mouse button control is going to move along Z. Holding down shift and using the corresponding buttons will move it along these axes as well, but have the camera pan with it. Of course, we also have 3D objects within our scene, in this case static meshes. We can select those and move them as well, which is how we're going to decorate the majority of the level that we build later on. Also have several display options. For example, large vertices, which can show us a little bit more about what the geometry looks like by selecting an object. And then also, you'll notice as well, what I'm going to display now is volumes within the level. We'll talk more about those later, but these are very simple geometric shapes used for blocking characters and interaction. You can see here that this is a brush that we've used to build a volume right next to it. By selecting that with large vertices on, it gives us a lot more easy to select vertex for when we're doing vertex editing with these. Now we're going to take a look at some of the display options within each of our viewports here. You'll notice on the top left hand of each of these viewports is the name of the viewport. If we right click on it, we're going to get a menu pop up. You see these first options are the display options for what type of viewport it is. You can see under the view menu here we've got a whole list of types of objects that can exist within it. For example, the active brush there, if we turn that off, the brush display within that viewport goes away. Turn it back on and it comes back. And you can see we've got a whole list of things there. For example, static meshes, which is going to turn on or off the visibility of the static meshes within the level. And then also you can see it's going to show us the shortcut keys for turning those on or off. So for example, with O, we can turn volumes on or off as long as we have focus within that viewport. This is pretty important because a lot of times we'll just have too much going on in our scene to be able to work with, and being able to turn off what we don't want to work with at any given point in time is really handy. Also, we can customize the placement of the viewports by going View, Configure Viewports Floating. It changes it to a resizable viewport for each of them. You can see we drag the size of this guy up here, or drag him back down. It's got pretty standard window control options there where we can maximize it, close it, turn it into an icon on the lower left-hand portion of the screen, and then once we've got them where we want them, we can go back to fixed and they will return to their normal size. Also, we can configure them with a couple of pre-configured options. I prefer working with this one because it gives me a nice large perspective view, and then if I need them, my orthographic view is over on the side. So we're going to be spending quite a bit of time maneuvering and working within these 3D views here, both the perspective and the orthographic views, to build the scene. So getting used to working within 3D space can be pretty important to what we're doing, but it gets more intuitive over time as you get used to it. And finally here, we're going to talk a little bit about tool instability. So you can see that I'm doing something that's supposed to be supported by the tool. It's working with a music file here, and go to import it, and it's going to crash. This is something that happens not terribly frequently, but it does happen with the Unreal Editor. So what we're going to do is talk about how to recover from that. There you can see we had the crash happen. So what we're going to do is go look at how to get at the backup maps that Unreal Ed creates by default. In a second here, you're going to see us dig down in the game install directory to the maps folder within it. And in the maps folder, we're going to see a series of maps called auto1 to auto1 through 9, basically, .ut2. Those are going to be the backup files. And so by finding the most recently saved version of the backup file, we'll be able to open that up in the editor and have what we were working on, or at least almost right up to what we were working on before it crashed, come up and be saved for us. Generally, it saves it, I believe, by default on the order of every 5 minutes, and you can change that within the options. So you can see here, as Unreal Ed boots up, that it's going to have pretty much the maps that we were working on, with the exception of maybe a couple of things we did at the tail end of it.